Hello and welcome to another Pathology News Thought Leaders podcast. This is the second part of our conversation with Rahul Deb. In part one, we introduced Rahul, his career journey from India to the UK, and his role at University Hospitals of Derby and Burton NHS Trust. We also explored Derby's digital pathology journey so far, from pulse-like imaging and validation to funding, Pathology, AI implementation, and why digitisation is the essential foundation for computational pathology. In this episode, we discuss the infrastructure, workflow, staffing, governance, and interoperability challenges that come with digital pathology, particularly within the NHS. We also explore how digitisation changes day-to-day reporting, MDT preparation, case sharing, and the future use of AI in pathology. Before we begin, please do support the channel. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, a like and or repost really helps us reach out to more people in the pathology community. And if you're listening on a streaming platform like Spotify or Apple, please hit follow so you don't miss future conversations. With that said, let's return to the discussion. So going back to the challenges that you had at Derby, obviously we've mentioned the human contingent there, which it sounds like you were quite lucky at Derby. Correct. Because you had a lot of support. Now, what about infrastructure? Derby was facing digital for the first time as one of the first NHS trusts to have considered doing it, and it's probably something, if it's fair to say, you didn't completely understand at the time, but that infrastructure challenge is so difficult. So how did you approach that?
And by infrastructure, I'll put different levels of infrastructure. There's the whole infrastructure of the equipment itself.
Yes.
And the IT challenges it kind of gives us.
That brings with it.
Yeah, that brings with it. It's not just about getting a scanner. So a couple of things actually, before to preface it as well, and we say it and you would have heard it, other people say this. If you think that going digital is just replacing your microscope with a scanner and then you're fine, you can't be far away from the truth. It'll expose it. If you've got bad lab processes, that'll get exposed by the digital by going digital. If you have poor section quality, that'll get exposed. That's just a aside from the question you've asked. But I think it also puts in the fact that it might expose other challenges that you haven't thought about. Which not just about the going digital, it's about all the other processes that can get exposed as a result of going digital. But infrastructure, I think the integrations within the NHS, we're still very, very, very poor in integration across systems, I think it's so difficult. It's unbelievable, actually, how systems talking to each other.
Yeah. And when you say that, do you mean internally within each NHS trust, or do you mean between NHS trusts?
Both.
Okay.
Even within. That's the surprising bit.
Yeah.
And for example, for a good, efficient digital pathology system, you need interoperability between the LIMS, which is your laboratory information management system, which is where you'll have all the information about the patients and clinical histories and macroscopic descriptions, and your IMS, which is your image management system. Now, they could be, and then wherever you produce a report in, some hospitals have chosen to produce a report in their LIMS, whereas some will do it in the IMS.
Okay,
But for good, efficient flow, you need the LIMS and the IMS to talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll give you one particular example which sticks with us quite strongly, actually. So there is a thing called global catalog. Effectively, what that means is, what does that LIMS call that particular test?
Okay.
So you have an hematoxylin eosin stain, which is your basic stain in, or let's say you have an ER stain.
Yeah.
The global catalog is what calls it an ER. And therefore, your scanner needs to recognize that global. So your IMS needs to have the same global catalog. I know that I'm going slightly technical, but just stay with me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So the LIMS terminology of a certain test needs to match the IMS terminology of a certain test. So therefore, the global catalog will have specimen types as well. So there will be a breast biopsy code, correct? A code for a breast biopsy in the global catalog of your LIMS.
Okay.
So that it knows what tissue type it is, but also what you've done with it. Have you done an hematoxylin eosin stain, or have you done an ER stain, for example? By definition, global catalog should be global, and should be the same in every lab in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, but I think you're probably going to say that that's
No,
not
it's
the case.
not. Not only that, even within the same LIMS provider.
Okay, yeah.
So if another hospital, adjacent hospital, has the same LIMS provider, their global catalog for a certain type of test, a breast biopsy, is called BRB in Derby. It might be called BRX in another hospital.
Okay, yeah.
You know, so when you talk of challenges, it's that global catalog took us 6 or 7 months to fix.
Wow. And that was when you say you fixed it, you mean within Derby?
Within Derby, with the help of the LIMS provider.
Yeah, but not outside of
No,
Derby.
this
So
is just for
there's still no standardization
correct
of this global catalog.
Correct.
Outside of, well, let's call it nationally in the UK.
Correct. Or as a minimum in England, which is the same healthcare.
Yeah.
But there's no in different hospital trusts that same test is called different. So when I buy a new scanner, it doesn't come. It's not plug and play by definition. Because it has to learn. It has to be taught our global catalog.
Sure.
When I say a scanner, I include the IMS with it, the image management software that comes with the scanner.
Yes. Yeah.
Which could be a different provider, but as a so that something like that takes absolutely or can take months and months and months.
Yeah.
Which you would have thought, really, it's a global catalog. The word global is just is a misnomer as best as it comes.
Yeah.
And so that took us months and months and months. So when I talk systems talking to each other, some of this challenges certainly in histopathology is that a lot of these LIMS providers, they were not designed for CellPath. And I might be quite unpopular when I say that, but they were designed for the blood samples, which deal with numerical values.
Yeah.
We deal slightly differently because we deal in words and we deal with reports.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So
they've had to adapt to that, I suppose.
So they've adapted their old system into CellPath systems.
Yeah.
And for the vast majority, while we were not digital, we went. It was okay, I think. But now with our histopathology having had such a big focus on it, with digital pathology, with modernization, with AI, I think people are realizing that these are not kind of fit for purpose a little bit. And that's that's been certainly a big challenge, I think. And I hope anyone listening out there can make CellPath dedicated LIMS and IMS so that we can all talk to each other in a seamless manner.
And we've covered a lot of challenges there. So if we can, let's move on to perhaps the solutions. So I think everyone's when we've talked about challenges, certainly here in the UK, everyone's in a similar boat.
Before we go to solutions, can I bring one more day-to-day challenge, which I think a lot of people there are challenges of staffing, which remains in pathology, and because the scanning is an additional step in the laboratory for consultants, it does make life better. But for the laboratory, it's an additional step that you've added to the process, so it does require more people in the lab. So again, if you're already short-staffed, that can present challenges. But the bigger kind of thing which I want to talk, which I think many departments will resonate with, is regulatory approval within hospitals. Again, every hospital has to go through its own sign-off processes to change processes, to get AI signed off, to have impact assessments, etc., etc.
Sure.
So, and that can be quite challenging. And again, I mean challenging, I mean in terms of you get it eventually, but it just takes time.
Sure.
Some of these committees meet once a month. You submit a paper. They look at it and they ask 2 questions, which you can answer in 10 minutes. But then it takes a month for them to meet again and sign off.
Sure.
So some of the NHS processes around getting approvals, getting IT systems to talk to each other, both within the department and outside. Again, there's so much firewall resistance around sending cases across departments.
Absolutely.
Because every trust is quite protective.
Yeah.
And what I don't understand, what is a mystery to me, is radiology have been doing it for years. Why is it a problem with pathology? I don't get it.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's funny, we're as digital pathology evolves, there's pharmaceutical companies out there that are starting to buy de-identified data.
Yes.
And if they, they're not even part of the NHS, and if they can get it from the NHS, why the hell can't the NHS share it with between trusts?
Correct.
It seems ludicrous, doesn't it?
It does seem ludicrous.
Yeah.
And even I think what is being talked about is a what should I say? Is a network-based approach, but it'll still be networks. Then one network won't be able to talk to another network. So it's still you're just expanding the pool a little bit, but not as best as you can. So you're absolutely right. I am not into clinical governance and information governance, and I'm sure there are reasons why certain things are done in a certain way, and it's patient data. We need to protect it. We need to make sure it's shared in an appropriate way. But I do wonder whether there is some merit in having a look at the whole process and seeing whether it can be simplified.
I think it's incredibly important to challenge these things, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I'm glad that we can offer you and the NHS a platform to do that here.
On that, there was an interesting. As a part of our user group of the IMS we're using, we were at a meeting, 2-day meeting where we were sharing experiences.
Yeah.
And there's one group of hospital trusts who are using one system as a network.
Okay.
So there are 3 or 4 hospitals, laboratories, part of the network.
On a single network.
And when we talked about IT being not an enabler, one of the persons from that lab said, and what's even more frustrating, that it goes at the rate of the slowest functioning IT department.
Yeah.
Not that the one who's going the slowest is able to hold the others back till they do their processes because the rest of them can't sign it off as well.
Okay, interesting. So I guess football teams is only as good as their worst player.
Correct.
As every 12-year-old going to football will learn at a very young age.
Right.
So we've spoken about a lot there, and one thing we did mention was workflows, but I really wanted to dive a little deeper into that. Could you tell us what your workflow actually looks like there at Derby?
So I'll compare it, Sid, with what it used to as well, kind of old and new ways of working. I talked about how for the lab, if the lab processes aren't quite well aligned, I think it can create real challenges in terms of workflow being disrupted when you introduce another additional step.
Okay, yeah.
And that is not just scanning, but it also depends on, do you do a digital QC before signing out the slides? Some labs choose not to, some labs have it. At what stage do you do a QC of the slide itself? So these are big questions that every lab needs to consider in terms of their workflow and pathway.
Yep.
And for the lab, it definitely adds 1 or 2 steps. And I think that is where labs will have to be quite slick at how they define their workflow. For us, the lab process currently has increased because of that, and has provided challenges. We have additional particular challenge to Derby of space, which means our scanner is in a different room. And it needs to be sometimes because it needs to have a dust-free environment. So we have a separate room just for the scanners.
Sure.
And so that provides its own challenges over the movement of slides, etc.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's
guess this is a different challenge as well. I guess we can touch on quickly is that none of these lab spaces were designed for digital pathology.
Absolutely.
It's something that's come along during or perhaps not even pathology. I don't know if a lot of labs, their buildings predate, having actual pathology practices there or not. But yes, certainly the scanning room, as you mentioned, that's a room that you found that fits the number of scanners that you have, probably.
Absolutely. And it's close enough to the lab.
Yeah, okay.
It's not very far away from the lab itself, but it does provide disruption to the workflow. Also, I think many pathology labs will not have the space anyway because we've all grown year on year. And just for our basic work, we've kind of probably outgrown. Certainly that's the case with us in Derby. We've outgrown our capacity of just getting the regular work through. So then to add this additional steps, additional monitors, etc., it has provided a challenge. And I think so that's the negative aspect of, if you like, the workflow impact of introducing digital pathology.
Okay.
The positive impact, of course, is at the consultant end. Like I said, once we start scanning the request form, which should be very soon, will be paper-free at the consultant end, which will be fantastic. Not just in terms of flexibility, working hours, but also working from home in terms of, it's not uncommon for us now to be, I should say it's quite common for us, between my colleagues and I, to constantly share opinions with each other.
Yeah.
Because inbuilt in the system is an email that goes and then people reply. We sometimes jump on the phone. Things that would wait for the next day for a colleague to come back from leave, etc. We just happens now within the breast team, and it's absolutely fantastic. So
amazing.
it has definitely helped. including, and maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing, but including yesterday, we had several, which was a Sunday, by the way, I had several conversations with my colleagues around different cases. So I think that's been really good.
Yeah.
I hope we can reach a position where we can share cases between hospital trusts. We've just talked about that as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I hope that time isn't far off.
Yeah.
And lastly, of course, what I think has been hugely impactful in our trust is that doing the MDTs digitally. Not only has it allowed us to do it remotely, having said that, I believe that I go in person to the MDT because I think that helps create and retain my relationships with my clinical colleagues.
Yeah.
If you just, I think that's quite important overall, but also for patient safety, etc. That we have good relationships with our colleagues, and I think that in-person meet is still relevant.
Yeah.
But at least it allows us the option of doing it remotely should there be a need.
Yeah.
And also in our trust, we should review our slides. So which meant our admin staff was to prepare for these MDTs, which spent absolutely hours getting the MDTs ready, arranging the slides in a certain order for us to review. And then give it to us, and then we would take the slides to the MDT room or to bring it back, and that was just now preparing the MDT digitally takes them literally minutes.
Yeah.
So I think and for us,
huge
not having
difference,
to huge difference.
Yeah.
I think that doing the MDTs has been absolutely transformational. I think and very, very good, a very great benefit.
Yeah.
And as I said, the benefits of AI, etc., we will realize in time. Some departments already have done it. I think so. I think in terms of workflow, it has definitely made an impact. It was always predicted to make an impact, and many of it for the positive.
Yeah, amazing. And I think you're in a bit of a unique position, and I want to ask you about this because your background obviously starts in India, and then at some point in your career you come to the UK, and with that, you've obviously got these connections and ties to India. So, I think from what I understand, that's given you a perspective on what Indian healthcare looks like and what the UK healthcare looks like. So, let's take this opportunity to reflect on that. So, thinking about that, what are the major differences in digital pathology in somewhere like India to the UK?
I was quite fortunate. I always think have worked in India and in the UK. I say this publicly. I've said this very often. I grew up in Mumbai, large, busy city. Where things can be quite tough sometimes, but quite nice, amazing city. The energy is unbelievable. I did my postgraduate training in Tata Memorial Hospital, again, in fantastic place. But very, very busy, the largest cancer hospital in India at the time. And I always say this, that being born and growing up in Mumbai and doing pathology at Tata Memorial Hospital prepared me for whatever else the world could throw at me. And I do mean that, actually. Both systems are very, very different. And I think the UK system is pretty much known to many people, I think. So rather than talk about that, which is a very national health service, fairly uniform as it can be, done at a national level, kind of for the whole country. Approvals, etc., all done through national bodies and commissioning, etc. India is very different. India is sometimes what we could say first world and third world and I know third world is not a term people like to use anymore, but if you get the concept of, I think, two very differing healthcare systems within the same country in terms of affordability, in terms of facilities, in terms of infrastructure.
That's understandable, really. So I was hoping that you could give us some reflections on the differences between what healthcare and particularly pathology looks like in somewhere like India and here in the UK.
Yes, and I think in terms of certain things that we take for granted can also be a challenge for things in pathology, like formalin fixation.
Yes.
I've just returned from doing a kind of 5-city HER2 workshop in 5 different cities in India through AstraZeneca.
Yes,
And I think some of those things we heard there and was kind of the challenges they face around certain basics around kind of formalin fixation, etc., which we take for... at least some of the processes we take for granted here. But equally, I would say that some of the labs I visited
Yeah.
were absolute cutting edge, and I didn't
Amazing,
have I
yeah.
didn't have a clue what they were doing half the time, some of the times as well.
Yeah.
So it was really quite eye opening for me as well, in kind of in terms of some of the cutting edge technology that
Yeah.
was available,
Yeah.
and it was really impressive to see. So even within India, there is more and more affordability, and there are more and more schemes of making things available. As I understand, I'm having been out of the country for so long, I'm an outsider to the kind of day-to-day workings in a way,
Yeah.
but I certainly have reasonable insight of having been
Yeah.
there. But more, I was in one of the government institutes in a city called Bhubaneswar,
Okay.
and they were talking of government schemes around oncology and cancer, access
Yeah.
to cancer treatments, etc., which is really quite encouraging actually.
Yes.
So things are certainly getting better, but they're very, very different in India.
Yeah.
In terms of digital pathology itself, again, there is variable adoption as you would if a relatively wealthier system like the NHS has such variety in adoption, it is only to be expected. I think
Yeah.
that there is a statistic I heard, but I won't be able to give you the evidence. Is around 10% of Indian labs are digital.
Okay.
So there's a long way to go, I think, in that sense.
But yeah, so 10% are digital, but of those 10%, they're very high-end digital labs, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, that's what
Yeah.
they will be. That's what
Yeah,
they will
okay.
be, and I think they'll be slightly digressing. Of course, I think that's quite important in a way for us in terms of when we talk about AI. And I'm sure you'll be aware there's a lot of talk about data bias in AI. A lot of
Yes.
the AI, but not that there is one, we just don't know sometimes. Most of the AI algorithms are developed in the West around a certain type of population type. Is it applicable globally? Do we need what is now called the global South
Absolutely.
to be involved more often in these trials? And I know in our databases, I would certainly say so. Are we automatically assuming that diseases are different? I'm not sure, but we just don't know till we have our data set to be comparatively representative
Yeah.
of different population types.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's fascinating, and it's my opinion that every histopathology lab should look at least digitizing their slides at this very moment in time, because they're dealing with a different gene pool, and with that comes really a different proteomic pool. And they may not look too different to a human pathologist.
What's underneath,
A whole slide image from an African, or a whole slide image from a Caucasian British man. But to a piece of AI, to an algorithm, they could look vastly different.
They may be.
Yeah.
I don't think we know yet.
It's fascinating approaching those questions now, and I guess questioning where we're going to go with all of that. To begin to wrap this up then, Rahul,
Yeah, sure.
first of all, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It's been a really interesting conversation, a real pleasure to have you on Pathology News. But I wanted to ask you if you had any advice for anyone just getting into pathology, or who's interested in this subject and is perhaps studying medicine and in the very early stages of their career.
So pathology has given me a good life. I would certainly say that I enjoy what I do mostly.
Yeah.
I do think certainly as a histopathologist, having to see as much as you can. Ultimately, what they say is miles under under your radar or whatever. So as much, not glass anymore, as many images. I should say get as much glass under your nose as possible. But it's no longer that. Oh, it won't be for many of them. See as much as you can, work as hard as you can, because ultimately it's the data bank of images that you have that help you experience.
Okay. Yeah.
Dive into the deep end as best as you can, and that'll help have good relationship with the clinicians. Don't view them as some kind of adversarial colleagues. I never have. And I think so I think that would be my advice to and ask. There is no such thing as a stupid question. There really isn't.
Yeah.
Very often we worry about
what we're going to say or how
and
we're going
what
to
it
say
might get perceived as, because it
Yeah.
might seem stupid, but there really isn't. There are many. There are enough people out there who will encourage you to answer, kind of ask those questions and answer them. So that was certainly, I would say.
I think that's fantastic advice, and it goes well beyond pathology as well. It's, good life advice for any young person. And a very last question then for you, Rahul. So, I wanted to ask, if you weren't a pathologist, what would you have spent your career doing, and what would you be now?
Gosh, that's a difficult question, but one that I have thought about. Not that, as I said, I've absolutely enjoyed my life as a pathologist, and I've had done really good stuff. Quite pleased and proud of what I've done. But maybe my other interests were kind of around politics and public speaking, debates, all that in school.
Yeah, I can see that coming through.
And so maybe I would have done something around the mix of politics and kind of public speaking. I always said something like a news presenter, maybe have my own podcast, around something like that. So that some kind of news, some kind of presentation around politics, around, maybe, who knows? And maybe it was a good job I didn't do that. But anyway, that certainly would be one of my things.
Well, if you fancy a late stage career change, there's always a place for your pathology news. So.
Thank you. I'll take you up on that offer.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. And that brings us to the end of the conversation. Now, across these 2 episodes, we've covered a huge amount. Rahul's career journey from India to the UK, the digital transformation at Derby and Burton, the realities of validation, funding, AI implementation, infrastructure, workflow change, staffing, governance, interoperability, and the future of computational pathology. Now, what comes through really clearly here is that, as it has with actually many of the conversations that we've had on Pathology News, that digital pathology is not just a technology project. It's a clinical, operational, cultural, and infrastructural shift. Scanners and software may be the visible part of the change, but successful implementation depends on everything around them: the people, processes, systems, standards, training, and trust. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Rahul for sharing his time, experience, and insight so generously, and for speaking so openly about both the opportunities and the challenges of bringing digital pathology into routine practice. Thank you as well for watching or listening. If you found this conversation valuable, please do like and repost it on LinkedIn. It really helps us. And a follow on whatever streaming service you might listen to it on, whether it's Apple, Spotify, or anything else, also really, really supports us. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you on the next Thought Leaders.